Hey everybody, good afternoon. I'm Dustin Strong. This is Ask Me Anything. Every Tuesday and Thursday, sometime around 12:45, sometimes a little later depending on what happens, we go live and answer your questions. They're questions that have been emailed to us over the week or questions that people have had here in the clinic over the week that we feel are really helpful to share. And there's a lot of common things that keep coming up, and we find it really helpful to give people a different perspective on a lot of these things, because it's so much more empowering to have the knowledge and just a different perspective and filter to kind of understand this information, because we keep getting a lot of very similar questions. And one of the things that we had a question about is a protein powder. And so instead of just saying, is this protein powder okay or not, I want to kind of go a little bit deeper into it and help you understand our way of thinking and approaching that, and why we're such advocates of whole foods versus something that is like an isolated protein powder. Now, looking at this ingredient list, it's cold processed, cross-flowed, microfiltered whey protein isolate. So the goal of taking this obviously is to get more protein into the individual and making sure that they have the protein to do all the 50,000 different combinations of amino acids that are needed to make you healthy and strong and beautiful. But there's two things I always want to caution people when you're taking a protein powder. Number one, make sure you're digesting it. The bigger concern in so many aspects of our health is that we're not supporting our digestion. We're not supporting our ability to totally break down these proteins. I have an article I'm going to post a little bit later that is about allergies. And it very clearly says in there, nobody knows why we're having this massive increase in allergies. Well, except for the fact that if we're not digesting the food, we're going to have an allergic reaction to an undigested protein. So there's so many things that we have to look at when we're understanding health, that there are multiple contributing factors as opposed to just going after one single isolated thing. So you see the theme here. When we start to isolate things, we start to isolate nutrients, we start to isolate proteins, we start getting ourselves into a little bit of trouble, because it's not the way nature packaged it for us. When we get our proteins from nature the way that they were actually originally packaged, we get so much more, and it makes a huge difference. And yes, we still have the problem whether or not we're digesting it, but there's also this change in it that happens when it goes from being raw in nature to something that is in a packaged or processed. So I'm always going to be a fan of the whole raw foods like nuts and seeds for protein, as opposed to something that is an isolated compound. Now, there's an argument out there that people are getting too much protein. And that's a little bit of a problem, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they're not digesting the protein. So if this is going to be the protein that you're going to go for, make sure that you are paying attention to how well you're digesting it. Are you getting gas after you eat it? Are you burping, bloating, having any type of weird or unusual digestive things happening? Because that would be a sign to me that maybe you're not digesting it enough, and I would look at other options. So a lot of times people are telling you need 70 to 80 to 90 or 200 grams of protein a day, and I don't really think that's entirely true. I think that we have essential amino acids that we do need to get into our body via proteins. So I think it's more important to get a good quality protein. And a lot of times whey protein is going to give you a lot of those. So that leads me to my other thing about protein and digestion. I'll have people talk about and start to understand that you do need to have this essential amino acid called tryptophan to be able to build serotonin to make sure that you're happy, and serotonin to be able to make melatonin to make sure you're sleeping. So one person said, well, I'm just going to go buy a supplement called tryptophan so that I can take that. And honestly, I don't feel comfortable with that, because you're never ever going to find anywhere in nature an isolated tryptophan all by itself. That's just not the way that nature designed for us to be able to get it. Now, sometimes they'll say, well, there's competitive pathways between the different amino acids, and so it's easier to get it this way. If you're fully digesting it, if you're getting it in the way that nature provided for our body, which is in nature, not outside of nature, it is going to be infinitely more wise in the way that it's going to work together. So always think in terms of, what does nature have to say about this? How would I find this in nature? Would I ever find this in nature? And is it something that is essential for me? So my multivitamins are nuts and seeds. Today is Tuesday, so Cashew Tuesday, I made sure I had my handful of cashews, which contain tryptophan, as well as other amino acids in there, as well as magnesium, as well as zinc, as well as so many things that people are taking multiple vitamins for, instead of just getting it from a whole food source and making sure your body's going to get it way that it was intended to be brought into our body. So think in terms of whether or not this would occur in nature, and whether or not I can digest that much protein And that's why I like that handful. You're going to get so much more for a handful of nuts. Okay, and this leads me to the other question we had. We have somebody asking about low-dose naltrexone, because this is something that a lot of people are finding in correlative to thyroid conditions and all these other conditions that it's helping with. And my only thing that I want to say about that is look up what it is and understand how that is affecting your body. And do you have to have it to live? That is always going to be my first question. Is it something that is essential? And before we start adding in something that's going to mess with how our body's working, shouldn't we first examine to make sure all of the things that your body has to have in order for it to function or respond to what we're putting in it are already there? And what we're finding is that so many people are not satisfying all their micronutrients. They're not satisfying their needs for healthy essential fats and digesting them. They're not satisfying their needs for vitamin D. The CDC had a report of 16,000 people they followed, and 94% of them were low on vitamin D. 88% were low on vitamin Bs. We had massive amounts of these vitamins that people are missing. So instead of trying to take something that's outside of that and put it in there to make all of this change, we should probably make sure all of that's there first so that we can respond to whatever's happening. So when you look at that, understand what is it doing and how is it affecting it. And a lot of times you'll understand that these are truly just things that are stimulating other things in the body, but you have to be able to respond to that stimulation. So that's the more important effect of that. So I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not somebody should take a medication, but what I'm going to say is learn what it's doing. Understand how it's affecting your brain, how it's affecting all the other things. Definitely look at the side effects and make sure you're aware of those, so if you start to experience them, you understand that they may be coming from what that is, because it's a known side effect. So before you do that, just make sure you understand it. That's the only advice I'm going to give on that. Not whether or not you should take it, but know what it's doing and understand that your body has to have all these other things to respond to whatever stimulation that you're giving it. Two different ways of thinking about it. These are just filters to help yourself be empowered in understanding that you have the ability to understand what this is doing by looking it up. And understand that these things technically tend to have side effects. But as we have things that come in nature as they're packaged, we tend to get them in the appropriate amounts, because that's the way we've been doing it for thousands of years. So just think about making sure you're eating whole foods, being mindful of getting these micronutrients, because so many people are not getting these micronutrients, and one of the easiest ways to satisfy a lot of those are in whole foods, especially raw nuts and seeds. Okay, if there's no other questions right now, I really appreciate you guys watching, and if you think this was a powerful message or a helpful message for people who are trying to figure things out, please share this video with them. Like this video so that more people can hear these different ways of approaching things, and keep those questions coming, because we want to make sure that you understand that there's always something that you can do to improve in your health, and almost always it has to do with, first of all, understanding and identifying where you may be lacking in something that is essential for your function. It's really somewhat simple once you figure out this equation. Okay, thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see you on Thursday.